Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and it's time for a new episode of Off the Beaten Path, a podcast for basketball coaches living in obscurity, working in obscurity, and even those who have made it out of obscurity.
Hey, it's a place for storytelling, learning, connecting, reconnecting, name dropping. We also provide food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly. When we talk off the beaten path, I don't know if there's ever one that might define it more than Donnie Tyndall. He's been on and off it his whole career, and we kind of pride ourselves in having guys that are coaches, and that's Donnie Tyndall right here. So we're glad to have the current Chipola head coach, Donnie Tyndall, with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I've known Corey a long time, and signed a player of his years ago who was a heck of a player for me at Morehead State, and have followed his career, coached against him. And so, Corey, I have a lot of respect and admiration for you as well and the job you do. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
We'll go back to those St. Catherine starts, but because you mentioned it, tell us about that connection with Corey. What player was that? Was that player any good? How hard was it to recruit from Corey?
Well, his name's Robert Murray, and Robert was about a 5'11", 6-foot combo guard, really good athlete. Played for you at South Georgia State, right? Right, Corey?
Actually, it was at Truett McConnell before I was down here. Yep.
Okay. And heck of a guard. That's been 15, 16 years ago, so it's aging us a little bit, but was an All-American, All-Region player for Corey, and averaged big numbers. And it was a lot of low to mid-majors type guys recruiting them. I feel like my assistant and I worked him pretty hard, built a relationship, and Robert had a heck of a year for us. He was newcomer of the week in the Ohio Valley Conference 4 or 5 different times that year, and averaged about 9 or 10 a game for me on a team that ended up going to the NCAA tournament, and won the conference tournament that year, beat Austin Peay in double overtime, and went on to play Alabama State in the play-in game on ESPN, and it's a pretty cool experience. And then played Louisville, who was the #1 overall seed that year, and got beat. We were actually up 2, I believe, at halftime on Louisville. Ended up losing that year, and then 2 years later played Louisville again and beat them that year. But with Robert, had a great year for us. Averaged, like I said, about 10 a game. Was on the all newcomer team, and then he decided not to come back for his senior year. He went to a Division II school. But I was glad Corey helped us get that done, because he was a big part of us going to the first NCAA tournament there at Morehead State in 25 years.
How about
Hey,
that?
and the neat part of that story, Donnie, I don't know if you'll remember this, but when your assistant come to see him in a workout, our season had just ended, and we were off for about a week, so we were doing a workout, and he got in a fight that day. Do you remember that story?
I do. I think I told my assistant, "Good, I want that dude."
That was the craziest thing.
Yeah, we've
Yeah,
always
that was unbelievable.
we've always liked guys with a little bit of an edge and a competitive spirit, we call that. So I knew he'd been coached the right way, and if he was willing to get in a little tiff, if you will, during a workout, basketball was probably pretty important. He was our type of dude.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome. Yeah, Donnie was the best. He came through and saw us and visited with myself on like a Sunday in my office in the middle of the mountains there in Georgia, and
Yeah,
that was cool. That was cool. I
yeah.
always appreciated that. That was
Well,
before he was big time. Before he started winning all those games at Morehead.
yeah, trust me, our budget at Morehead, you had to drive. I know as soon as our season ended, we jumped in a car, Barry Wortman and I, and we drove literally 25,000 plus miles within a 30-day window. I mean, we went to New Jersey to see Kenneth Reed. We went, I mean, you name it. That's just what you had to do. And we would stay in a hotel. Some, don't get me wrong, but there were several nights that, while I was at Morehead, we'd pull over and sleep 3 or 4 hours in a gas station parking lot just to get up and roll on to the next spot. So meeting somewhere in the mountains on a Sunday, shoot, that was nothing. That's just what we did at that level. It's kind of crazy. 4, 5, 6 years later, whatever it was, you're taking private planes to go recruit at Tennessee. It's a whole different world. But I look back on my times and those relationships I made, the people I met, guys like yourself, have ended up being lifelong friends. So a lot of fun stories. At the time, I probably would have liked to had a private plane or two, but you do what you got to do, just like you've always done to get players and win games, man.
So close and so far, right? These D1 schools, the difference between them. It's quite a contrast.
Yeah, it
But
really is, and I tell people, they're like, because I left the NBA where I'd been for 4 years to go junior college, and they're like, man, why would you do that? But, Chipola, it's certainly, it doesn't have the resources of a Tennessee. Let's not misinterpret what I'm getting ready to say, but it's a great JUCO job, so it's like being at a Morehead. Yeah, you've got to drive everywhere and all those things, but it's nothing I hadn't done before, and couldn't get myself to go do again. So, again, those type of places, yes, it is Division I, but in a lot of instances, you're rolling on a junior college budget. That's just what it is, and you got to make do. That, or you get your tail whipped and you never get another chance. So you drive through the night and stay in gas station parking lots and do what you have to do.
That's awesome. Well, Donnie, let's go back to the beginning. What got you into coaching? Like, what, I know you were a successful player, so maybe you want to tell a little bit about that. But what kind of got you into coaching?
Well, basketball had literally been my life since I was in fourth grade, man. That's all I thought about. I'd be in class drawing up plays in ninth and 10th grade. And, I didn't necessarily love school, but I love basketball. And that was my ticket to go to college. And I was a good high school player, a good junior college player, but not a very good Division I player. But I still had dreams like all the guys we coach nowadays do of playing some level of professional basketball after college, and I was hoping to maybe get to some small country, and I would have played for, a Coke and a bag of beef jerky just to keep playing, and just wasn't good enough. So coaching was the next stop, and I had gotten my degree in secondary education, so I planned to coach high school ball and teach. And I did my student teaching my senior year and really just did not enjoy the teaching part of it. And I remember saying to myself, man, I just don't know if I want to teach history for the next 40 years. It just didn't get me going. I never even had thought about coaching in college at that point. And one of my good friends, who was my graduate assistant in college at the time, said, well, why don't you try to be a GA or an assistant in college somewhere and get started in that route? And then I said, that sounds great. So I went back to my old junior college where I'd played a year before I signed at Morehead State, and started my coaching career there. And people, they think a lot of times that you just start this thing at Kentucky and roll. We're at Iowa Central Community College in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I didn't get paid one penny that first year. They did get me a dorm room, so I was living in the dorm for free, but I didn't even get a meal plan. So I tell this story, and it really is pretty amazing. I would work security 5 nights a week, Sunday through Thursday, from 11:30 at night to 4:30 in the morning. And back then, minimum wage was $5.15 an hour. So I would work security, and then I'd bounce up about 6:37, get to the office and work all day, recruit, come back, go to security, 11:30 to 4:30 in the morning, because I had to make enough money to pay my grocery bill and my phone bill. You didn't have cell phones back then, but just your landline, was about 75, $80 a month, and groceries. And that's what I did to get by. And I tell people, it's kind of a funny story. I was engaged to my first wife at the time. She was a senior in college finishing up, and she would come out about once a month for a weekend and hang out with me. And when I was doing security, I had to wear this orange vest that I had to drive around the car in. And you get out at each building, you go check the doors, make sure the doors are locked. Then you get back in your car, you drive to the next building, check the door, make sure it's locked. and you had to wear this orange vest. So when she came in, we didn't get much time together. So she's driving around in the car with me, and I remember telling her, I'm gonna be a head Division I coach someday. I'm just telling you. And she's like, "Well, that all sounds good, DT, but right now you look like Barney Fife." We laughed about that forever, but it's just kind of what you had to do. And so I did that for the first year, and then I made enough of an impression on our vice president at the school that the dorm parent job came open. And then that summer they offered me that job where I was in charge of the whole dorm, overseeing it in regard to my coaching responsibilities. So I was making, I think it was like a whopping 17,000, and my wife was there teaching school. So we were living for free and making about 40,000 between us. And we thought we were living high on the hog then,
Right.
So it was pretty cool. But another story about living in the dorm that year, I had one pot, a decent sized pan that I had one fork and one spoon and a little burner, and one burner in my that you plug in the wall in my dorm room. And usually for dinner or lunch, I'd either cook mac and cheese or ramen noodles. I eat it out of that pan with my fork, and then I'd wash the pan out, and maybe that next morning or whatever, I'd get up and those big cheap bags of cereal you buy, like Cocoa Pebbles is called like Cocoa Crisp or something, it's some generic name. And I'd pour it in a pan, and I'd have one spoon. So I had a fork and a spoon and one pan that entire that entire first year of coaching.
Dishes were easy to do, but this is the stories that parents tell. It was uphill both ways, and it snowed in the summer, but it's true, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is how you lived in order to get into coaching because it's what you wanted to do, right? Why,
no doubt.
why did you stay? Why did you keep down that path, coach?
Well, basketball literally is other than my family and my faith, the most important thing in my life. Like I said, literally since fourth grade, I just have been ate up with the game. I eat, sleep, and drink it. Always have, probably always will. And it was my way. I remember my mom telling me early on, in life, if you get a job that you truly love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I really haven't. I mean, the security part, I guess you would call work, but the coaching part of it has never been considered work. It's something that I love to do, getting players better. And I look back and I said I wanted to play forever and achieve a dream and goal, and wasn't quite good enough. And so when I get an opportunity to help young people achieve their goals and dreams now, I guess I'm living through them a little bit, helping them to achieve things that maybe they've always dreamt of being able to do. So that's a big part of it. I just love basketball. I love helping young people, and it certainly beats, as my mom would say, having a real job.
My dad always says it beats digging ditches.
Yeah,
That's what he
that's
always
right.
tells
That's
me.
exactly
So
right.
that hey, and you may be a first, Donnie. We have a lot of guys that have volunteered and do different things and tell us those stories, but usually getting a promotion to dorm monitor, that's usually not a term you hear. That's a promotion. Usually you don't hear that, right? That's usually the start. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
tell us, you go next, you go to St. Catherine from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's crazy how things work out in life. But after 2 years of working with Coach Pilcher, who is a really, really well respected junior college coach, he's in the Hall of Fame, won over 800 games. I had a guy by the name of Greg McDermott offer me the graduate assistant spot for him at a Division II school at the time in Nebraska called Wayne State University. That's where Coach McDermott, who's now at Creighton, was the head Division II coach. And I was real close to doing it, and I got involved with this St. Catherine Junior College job in Springfield, Kentucky. And Billy Donovan, who was a buddy of mine, I'd worked this camp. He was at Marshall at the time, and I'd worked this camp. I got to know Billy a little bit when I played at Morehead State. He was an assistant for Coach Patino at Kentucky. Um, the president of St. Catherine College was a lady by the name of Martha Lane Collins. And Martha Lane Collins had been the former governor of Kentucky, the first female governor of the state of Kentucky. And so she was the president of this little junior college, St. Catherine. And Billy knew her a little bit through meetings at booster functions and different things, being at Kentucky. And so I asked him to call her. And I didn't think there probably was a real chance I'd get the job. I think I still was 23, maybe just turned 24. And, and he called her and she said, well, I'd like to interview him. And so I drove all the way from Iowa for an interview, and my wife had went with me, and she's sitting out in the car when I go in and interview. And she was from Kentucky. We went together at Morehead State, so she was excited about the possibility of getting back home. And I came out of the interview, and she said, "Well, how you think you did?" And well, I think I'm going to get the job. And she was like, "Oh, you're always so over the top positive. You're not going to get this job. You're 23 years old," or whatever I was. I said, "Well, we'll see." So we drive back to Iowa a day or two later, and back then, of course, you don't have cell phones, so we get a message on the voicemail machine, and it's her to give her a call. She wanted to offer me the job. So it's 19,000, and it was like I think it was about the middle of June, and she couldn't start paying me until July 1. But I asked her, I said, "Hey, can I just come and maybe live in the dorm or whatever I need to do just to get started so I can start putting my team together?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's fine by me." So I get there about the middle of June and start working, putting my team together. And, it's kind of funny. The first, they had these two big old school vans. They didn't have the school car was getting fixed or something at the time. So to go recruiting, they give you a gas card, and I just drove one of the vans. So I'm driving all over the state of Kentucky, and I'm going to Hopkinsville, Kentucky to see this big 6'8" kid I ended up signing. He played for me and then went to the University of Louisville. So he was a heck of a player. But I'm driving across the state, and the van's motor blows up. So my very first recruiting trip at little old St. Catherine College, I got to call back to the school and tell them that the van quit running. So we had to get the van towed. I had my buddy come all the way over and pick me up, take me back to the college. And I mean, it was just one of those things. You're like, are you serious? What's the line now they use? You can't make it up. You can't make this stuff up. Like very first recruiting trip, the van blows up on me. So,
Where was it, Coach? Where'd you leave the van on the side of the road in
well,
Kentucky?
it was somewhere between the Lexington area, because Bardstown was just outside Lexington, and
Okay.
Hopkinsville. I can't remember where we were, and back then, you didn't have navigational devices. You had the road maps and no cell phones, so I had to walk up the road, and you had
Mm-hmm.
those old prepaid calling cards you used.
Yeah.
So I'm
Mhm.
sure the whole new school was saying, "Who did we hire as this new coach? He's already blown the darn van up, you know."
Hey, it must be a Kentucky thing because probably about the same year on the way to Indiana to recruit, car blew the motor in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. So
Okay.
the smoke's coming out. You're pulling to the side of the road, trying to figure out what's next, calling
Yeah.
back. I hear you.
I love
Hey,
it.
Coach Corey always says this on this podcast: name drop as much as you possibly can, and you're doing pretty well so far with former governors and Billy Donovan and whatnot. What
I
was that
love it.
Billy
I love
Donovan connection that then
Well,
got you to the president of St. Catherine's?
when like I told you, growing up, basketball was my life. So all the good players coming up, I followed them and kind of, for lack of a better term, worshiped them. The Mark Prices, the Isaiah Thomases. At the time, Billy was a heck of a college player at Providence. Quinn Snyder, guys like that, and so when I played against Kentucky when I was at Morehead, I actually had one of my better games. They had 8 or 9 assists, and we played Kentucky real tough. That was their team with Jamal Mashburn and that group that ended up getting beat by Duke in the Elite Eight. But after the game, Billy was an assistant for Coach Pitino. And I remember stopping Billy in the handshake line and just saying, "Hey, Billy, I just want you to know, I was a big fan of yours when you played." And so he certainly appreciated that. And then I called their office when he was at Kentucky, and I was going to work their camp at Kentucky that summer. And then maybe it was the next summer, he ended up getting the Marshall job. And so as I was getting started in my coaching career, I'd go work his camp for a week every summer at Marshall. And we just had built a relationship that way. Still friends to this day.
We always somehow tie every show into working camps.
Yeah.
Cyril. We keep it alive, even though the new guys don't know about it. We keep it alive. So I
Yeah, it's
appreciate
amazing.
that, Tim.
Well, that was the way, if you remember, like, again,
Yeah,
you didn't have email, you didn't have internet. So, like, to be able to meet some of these guys and get to know them and let them get to know you, that was how you did it. You went and worked. I mean, I'd go around, I worked 5-star, I'd work Marshall, I'd go work Jerry Mullins Junior College camp. Like, I'd work 5 or 6 camps a summer and just build relationships and get to know guys, and hopes that they'd help you get a player or maybe someday help you get a job. And
yeah,
that's just what you did back then.
yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So how was it? Kentucky, that was the only junior college in Kentucky. Is that correct?
Actually, there was another one. There were 2 at the time called Sullivan Junior College.
Okay.
And the year before I got the job, Sullivan Community College had a great team. They won the national championship, and they had guys like Elton Scott, who went to West Virginia. Eric, what was Eric's last name? He went to Oklahoma and played for Kelvin Sampson. I mean, they were loaded, and they won the national title. And they brought everybody back. They returned basically their entire team, and they were preseason #1 in the country that year. And we had to beat Sullivan to be able to just get to the regional tournament, which was held in Tennessee. And so here we
Mhm.
are, this small little junior college. We have literally 150 students in our school. The gym, I don't know if you've ever been there, Corey, but it had 5 rows of bleachers on one side. It was like a middle school gym. And
It's rough.
we've got to beat Sullivan, preseason #1 in the country and defending national champs, just to get to the regional to have a chance to go to Hutch. And I'll be darned if we didn't beat them. We split in the regular season. We beat them home. They beat us at their place, and then we beat them in the state play-in game to go to the regional in overtime. And we were ranked top 10 in the country all year, and went to the regional and had a good first game. We won. Then we played Bruce Stewart, who was a great junior college coach for years. He was at Hiawassee Junior College, and we beat them in overtime and the regional title to go to Hutch for the first time in the history of the school. So Bruce's team was like 32-2 that year. Their only 2 losses were to us. We had to beat the #1 team in the country to get the regional. We had to beat Bruce to get to Hutch for the first time in the history of the school. So it was an amazing first year as a head coach, and I was 24, 25 years old.
Wow. So probably not to go too far ahead, but getting the Chipola job, that might have got you the Chipola job and you didn't even know it
Yeah, exactly.
because you
Because
beat Bruce Stewart, who was a long
yeah,
time Chipola rival at Northwest Florida later.
that's right. And
It's
then
funny.
yeah, and the AD here, Coach Johnson, knew Bruce real well and knew what a great coach Bruce was. So that is something we talked about in my interview here at Chipola. Like, yeah, I've got junior college experience. In fact, competed against Bruce, who was at Northwest Florida. It used to be Okaloosa Walton before they changed the name.
Yeah.
But so yeah, probably did help a
Hold
little
up.
bit. Yeah.
That's all. So how do you go from making a national tournament at a place? I mean, Cyril, you don't understand. You've been to Truett, Cyril. Think of Truett McConnell, and then even smaller than that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable
Hearing
that
the
you made it there.
numbers. Wow. Yes.
Well,
So, so
I'll tell you a pretty cool story. So, they'd never been to the national tournament in the history of the program. And we only had 5 scholarships total that we had to divide up. You probably did that at Truett with guys, and some of the guys would have to use their Pell Grant or get a student loan. So it's not like we were 15 full scholarships like we have at Chipola nowadays. You had to piecemeal it together. You really did. And so we go to the national tournament and there's no budget to go. Like, we don't have money in our budget to even go to Kansas. So here we've got a week before we got to go to Hutchinson, Kansas. We've got to get a bus to take the players. We've got to pay for hotel rooms. We've got to get food, and none of that. Like, I'm talking $0 is in there to do any of this. So you'll laugh, in a town of about 3,000 people, but we literally started bucket dropping downtown after practice. We would go downtown, and our players and our coaches would have buckets, and we'd be at intersections trying to get money donations to be able to make the trip. Well, we had a
Send your
new
team to Hutch. Send your team to Hutch.
yeah, exactly. And so we had a new president that had just came in a few months before, and he worked out a deal with some bus line company in the Lexington or Louisville area that basically donated the bus for us. So then we just had to raise money for the hotel rooms and the food. And everyone in that community was so excited that we'd made it to Hutch that they stepped up, and we had people giving food donations, and we raised a bunch of money with the bucket drops. And it's amazing. Again, another quick story, but you won't recognize this name, but you guys know the racehorse legend Bob.
Bob Buford.
Yeah, the guy that's like a horse racing legend,
Yep.
right? Well, he's married to a gal by the name of Jill. Well, when we're doing our bucket drop, there was a reporter about 25 years old, just an absolute knockout, that came out and interviewed us, to do a story on us going to Hutch. We're raising money to be able to even make the trip. And her name was Jill Moss. And that ended up being Bob Buford's wife 15 years or 10 years later. So I never ran into her since. She's probably in a lot of different social circles than I am now, but it'd be pretty cool to bump into her and ask her if she remembers that story. But she came out and did a big, about 10-minute story on us that ran on the local news and ended up being Bob Buford's wife. So anyway, you run along a lot of different people in this game. It'll take you some different places, but we raised the money and we were able to make the trip, which was pretty cool.
Being in similar shoes, I imagine the president and the administration, every free throw you're making down the stretch is secretly pulling for you to miss them a little bit,
Yeah, I never
because they
thought
know what the
about that.
money's going to be.
I never thought about that, but you're probably right. They were
So,
thinking, how are we going to do this?
so you go from there, miracle season. Where does that take you next?
Yeah, to LSU. Coach Brady just got the job at LSU, replacing Dale Brown, who was a legend there. And Coach Brady had had a great career at Samford University in Birmingham. And Kermit Davis, who was the head coach at Idaho at the time, had came in and watched our team practice that year and was recruiting a couple of our players. So I got to know Coach Davis pretty well throughout that year. And he was leaving the head coaching job at Idaho to go be the associate head coach with Coach Brady at LSU. And then they hired Butch Pierre, who ended up being probably the best recruiter in America during his time at LSU, and the second assistant. So the staff was Coach Brady, Kermit Davis, associate head coach, Butch Pierre, and then they had one spot open. And I had the best point guard in the country, a kid named DeJuan Collins, who'd led the country in assists, was a heck of a player, about 6'2", 200 pounds, real strong physical guard. And he'd already had offers from about 10 or 15 high major schools. And so they had an assistant spot open, and I'd been offered an assistant with Coach Sampson at Oklahoma to bring the kid with me to Oklahoma. And Coach Brady was just taking over at LSU, and I knew Kermit, and they wanted to hire me in the third assistant spot. And I tell people now, let's get this straight. They weren't trying to hire me because they thought this Donnie Tyndall guy was some up-and-coming superstar and this great X and O tactician guy. They were hiring me to get my point guard, period, And so I decided to take my point guard to LSU and be the third assistant there. And so we moved on to Baton Rouge, and I was there for 4 years. Had some great memories. We won the SEC championship in my third season, went on the Sweet 16, and Coach Brady was always a great mentor to me. And then Coach Davis ended up being one of my best friends in life, and a guy that I ended up going with to Middle Tennessee later on in my career. But those 4 years at LSU were pretty cool and pretty special. And I remember, again, kind of speaking things into existence. I told my wife at the time I was the youngest assistant in the SEC. I was 24, 25. I guess I was 24 when I got the job, turned 25 that summer. And I said, someday I'm going to come back to this league and be the youngest head coach in this conference. And again, she kind of rolled her eyes like, yeah, okay, whatever. Right now you're the third assistant getting the donuts and coffee for Coach Brady for camp, and I said, I was like, okay, you'll see. And then when I got the Tennessee job, I was 43, and I was the youngest head coach in the SEC at that time.
Speak it into existence, right? Believe
Yeah.
it, make it happen.
That's right. That's right.
So how crazy was that going from a school that was 150 students to an SEC school that has more guys on their football team than you
Yeah.
had students probably?
Yeah, it was crazy, and I tell people, you win 30 games at St. Catherine, you're 24 years old, you get coach of the year and all that corny stuff that comes with it, and you say to yourself, I think I kind of got this thing figured out. Well, you go work for a guy like Coach Brady, who's a great X and O guy. Kermit's a great X and O guy, and you find out real quick how little basketball you actually know. And so the learning curve and the things I was learning every day on a daily basis just to grow and get better as a coach was unbelievable. But nowadays on a SEC staff, you literally might have 20, 25 people. I mean, you've got a director of ops, an assistant director of ops, a player personnel, assistant player personnel. You got 15 different graduate assistants running around. I mean, when I was at LSU at the time, we didn't even have a director of ops, and we had one graduate assistant. So you're talking about, as the third assistant on that staff, I did basically 90% of the skill workouts. I did every other scout with Kermit. I did all the mail outs for underclassmen recruiting. They don't even probably do mail outs anymore, but back then you were sending out 200, 300 written mail outs or things you signed for Coach Brady going out 3 times a week, because you didn't have, again, internet and things. That was your way of recruiting. So I had 15 guys I was in charge of academically to monitor and make sure they were going to class and seeing their tutors and all those things. So I can tell you this, for 4 years, I certainly never took a vacation. I don't know if I had 5 days off in 4 years. I'm talking about Monday through Sunday, all day, every day, just trying to keep my head above water. Being that young and not knowing really what I was doing other than just kind of learning on the fly, if you will, and trying to stay organized and on top of the next task because, Coach Brady's line, and I use it to this day, was always, he'd come in, he'd say, Tindy, that was his nickname for me. Tindy, any problems? And you had to update them if there were any problems. Yeah, Lamont missed class, or Ronald was late, or Jabari didn't meet with his tutor. And so I figured out real quick, because who always caught the bad end of those problems was Tindy. He'd be like, well, God dang, what are we doing? So I learned real quick when it was Tindy, any problems? The answer became, no, sir, everything's good, coach. Everything's good. And then I handled the problems, behind the scenes before they would get to him, unless they became really big. Then, of course, I would have to bring it to the table. But I'm telling you, 4 years, no vacation. And I bet you, this is no exaggeration, I didn't have 5 to 10 days off in 4 years. But again, going back to what we talked about initially, I was just excited as heck to be an assistant coach in the SEC and have a job at that level and help players get better. And so it was never work to me. It really wasn't.
How about that? Hey, what are some of these players that you worked with? You mentioned names with the Tindy problems that you handled as a good assistant, but you got a Stromile Swift, you got Temple, you got Jabari Smith. What are some of these names that you worked with that you were doing the individual workouts with and learning with the players?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. We had such a special group of guys, and you look back on it at the time, and you know how talented they are because they're so highly recruited. But you don't really think about it. You just think, well, it's the next guy. You work them out the same way you would at Iowa Central or St. Catherine. You're intense, you're demanding, and you're holding guys accountable, and you're teaching what Coach Brady wants you to teach, and just trying to get them better every day. And a guy like Stromile, I would obviously stay on top of him in regard to his academics and make sure he was doing everything he was supposed to do and work those guys out hard. And then, in 2 years, he was the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft. And it's pretty cool that right away, a lot of those guys probably don't acknowledge you or thank you or appreciate you like you would maybe hope right away. But to a man, all those kids later on in life have written me or called me or text me or whatever, saying, man, I just can't thank you enough for all you did for me at that time in my life of helping me get where I was trying to get. And, I'll say this for sure. Jabari Smith, like his son's in the NBA now, I could say this probably with pretty, a lot of confidence, about 99% confidence. Had I still been at Tennessee or a high major school when Jabari Jr. was coming out of high school, Jabari Smith would have sent his son to play for me. I pretty much know that. So I think that speaks for itself when you have guys that would tell you they would love for their son to play for you. And Collis Temple, great player. Maurice was Maurice Carter was an NBA player out of Jackson, Mississippi. We inherited his senior year, but he and I built the relationship. So all those guys, and it's not just the NBA guys. To this day, Jermaine Williams, who was a great player, I helped him get a start in his coaching career and helped him with the job. And Reggie Tucker and Willie Anderson, I've helped them throughout their coaching career. So just a lot of fun, great memories, and those guys end up being like little brothers or sons to you later in life. They really do.
Especially at the age you were, right? As a young assistant, connecting with those guys and staying connected. You gotta love it.
Yep, no doubt about it. It was cool. You save them from a lot of stuff. I won't say the name, but one of them we've already mentioned had a girlfriend at the time, and he was, kind of having another date or two on the side, if you can imagine a 20-year-old kid doing that, right? I know that shocked you. And his girlfriend came into town, and she had flipped over the little message tape deal in his voice recorder and listened to some of the messages. So she was all upset and mad, and he came to my office all upset. Coach T, you got to help me handle this. And of course I did, but things like that we laugh about now 25 years later, but at the time they were pretty serious problems for those young guys to deal with.
So how in the world do you go from LSU to Idaho? I think you may have gave us a sneak peek. Kermit Davis probably had something to do with it, but give us that story.
Yeah, again, Coach Davis totally got me that job. I was the third assistant, as we just talked about. And at that time, the third assistant could not go out on the road and recruit. You could do underclassmen recruiting on campus. You could make phone calls. You could send mail out, but you couldn't go out on the road and recruit. And I knew for me to ever be a head Division I coach, I was certainly going to have to, prove myself as a recruiter, or at least have some recruiting experience. So what happened was Kermit Davis, former player Leonard Perry, who was the top assistant for Larry Eustace at Iowa State, had played for Kermit at Idaho. And Leonard was going back to be the head coach at Idaho. And he called Kermit and he said, hey, I'm really looking for a top assistant, a guy that can go out and recruit and get me players, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anyone? And Kermit said, yeah, I got one guy. You don't need to interview anyone else. This is the guy. And he told them about me. And so, at the time, again, you're leaving LSU to go to Idaho, who hadn't been real good at the time, going to work for a guy in Leonard that hadn't been a head coach yet. And I didn't even know him. I'd met him, but didn't really know him. But I was trying to be a head coach sooner rather than later. And I knew this was a role I needed to take advantage of in regard to the recruiting. And so I took the associate head coaching job at Idaho with Leonard, and so glad that I did. Leonard was great to work for. We're still good friends to this day. Learned a ton under him, and was able to get my feet wet. We had believe it or not, a top 30 recruiting class at the University of Idaho, and I had signed probably 7 or 8 of those guys in that class. And then lo and behold, Coach Davis, Kermit, gets the job that next spring at Middle Tennessee. And I had a chance to either go back to LSU in his role with Coach Brady, or go with Coach Davis to Middle Tennessee as the associate head coach. And most people would say, well, certainly you went back to LSU, right? And I didn't. I loved Coach Brady, had a ton of respect for him, but Coach Davis and I had built such a strong relationship my 4 years working together at LSU. He helped me get that job with Leonard at Idaho. And the plan was pretty much, hey, come here, help me 4 or 5 years. We'll get this thing rolling. And then if I'm fortunate enough to get another job, we'll help you get this one. And so I was all in. And after 1 year, left Idaho to go to Murfreesboro and be with Coach Davis at Middle.
Tangent back to a couple comments you made. Top point guard in the nation at St. Catherine's. A couple of these guys at LSU, this top recruiting class at Idaho. What's your trick, coach? How do you do this kind of recruiting levels where you are bringing in these top guys? Is it knowing the right people? Is it connecting with the right circle? What is it?
Well, it's certainly knowing some of the right people. Nowadays, that's way more vital and important for me now than it was then, because I was just getting started. I didn't have this huge network of people and friends that I have nowadays. But I think the biggest thing back then is me being a younger guy, players and even parents. I was young, but they could vibe my passion for what I did, and they knew I was going to take care of their son in regard to making them go to class and valuing an education and pushing them hard on the floor and promising them that we'd make them do all the right things off the floor. And I think, heck, I wasn't much older. When I took over at St. Catherine, I'm 23, 24. I had a couple 20, 21-year-old kids on the team. So I wasn't much older than these guys. And I think, we probably listened to the same music, had a lot of the same interest, and all those things probably helped in regard to landing good players or helping to land good players. And so that was part of it for sure.
And the hard work. I mean, just hearing your story, you're sleeping in gas station parking lots. You put in some work too, so
Get there.
don't
Yeah.
sell that short for sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Say, and even to this day, when you work like that, and because you're a grinder too, Corey, but like kids vibe if you really want them by how many times you call them or text them or email them, or back then it was write them handwritten letters or whatever. And so that's important to kids. Even today, it's important. It's done differently, but it's still very important. And you're right. We took a lot of pride in trying to outwork the next guy.
So at your time at Middle Tennessee, was that your longest stint anywhere, or was it the same as LSU
I was
as
there
far as
4 years,
time?
so same as LSU. Yeah, I was
Same.
there
Okay.
4 years.
Right.
Yep.
And
And
then you end up getting a head job from there.
yep. I was with coach for 4 years, and we really turned the program around. We taken over a program that had finished last and hadn't been doing very well, and we finished, I think, fourth or second for 4 straight years in the Sun Belt. Western Kentucky was loaded back then, but we had some really good teams, and then my alma mater, Morehead State, where I played, opened up. And a lot of guys, it's hard to get a head Division I coaching job from being a mid-major assistant. You either are like a head Division II coach, a head low major coach. You get a little bit better Division I job, or you're a high major assistant, because quite frankly, the press conference sells itself a little better if they're hiring the assistant from Kentucky instead of the assistant from Middle Tennessee. We all understand that and get that. And probably the one Division I job I had a real chance to get coming from Middle Tennessee was the place I played, Morehead State. I'd stayed in touch with a lot of those people, some of the bankers, some of the boosters. The athletic director and I weren't friends, but we were friendly. We knew of each other. And I had a lot of people, whether it was former professors or people in town, pushing for me when that job opened to help me get it. And lo and behold, we did. And then when I did get offered the job, they'd been bad for so long that I had several people, coaching friends in the business that I really respect, say, I don't know, DT, that's one you might have to pass on. They haven't won there forever. They don't have much tradition. Their budget isn't real good. And back then, now the OVC was real. Yeah, Austin P, Eastern Kentucky. Belmont was coming into the league. Murray State was in the league. I mean, it was a whole different league in the Ohio Valley than it is now. And people would tell you back then, Morehead State, along with probably Tennessee Martin, was the worst job on paper in that league. So it was a risk. It was a risk, but I've always been one of those guys, whether it was 24 and beating the defending national champs and the #1 team in the country in Sullivan. Which I might add this too about Sullivan. I joke, after that season they closed their program down. They stopped playing basketball at Sullivan. So I always say we put them out of business, man. We put them out of business. So I guess you gain confidence in doing those things, but you also probably become a little naive too as to how hard it is. And I found out real quick the only losing season I've ever had in my coaching career was my first year at Morehead State.
How about that? So you stay in touch with bankers and boosters. Let's not forget that, right? You're friendly with the president, AD, and some of those circles, and that pays off in the long run.
Yep.
Coaching friends say, maybe you don't take this job. You do, you have your first losing season, but in 2011, you're now beating Louisville in the NCAA tournament. How does that happen? How do you build that? What's the flow? I mean, talk about turning a program around and then getting an NCAA tournament win at Morehead State.
Yeah, I think it's obviously probably three things. First of all, it's recruiting. You got to have great players. And I recruited guys that weren't heavily recruited. Like we only beat, in my first 3 years at Morehead State, we beat one school on one player. And that was a kid by the name of John Lamb. We beat the Citadel on John Lamb. All the other guys either had Division II offers or guys that we just went and evaluated. And I said, you know what, he's good enough. He's just being under recruited. We took a guy, May Stallworth, who had no Division I offers out of high school. I signed him because he'd been in our team camp at Middle Tennessee State and played really good against our players at night. After camp, he'd play with our players and played well. He was all-state in Kentucky, but had NAI and Division II offers. I took him. He ended up being the all-time leading three-point maker in the history of Morehead State. I took Leon Buchanan because he was in the ABAC Junior College in Georgia, was all region, but had no Division I offers. But Bruce Stewart, who was at Northwest Florida at the time, Okaloosa Walton, called me and said, look, there's a kid we played against this year. I know he's undersized for his position, but I'm telling you, Donnie, take him. And I trusted Bruce enough. I took the kid, and he ended up being two-time first team All OVC at 6'3" power forward, and then the biggest one, we get totally lucky. We signed a kid named Kenneth Farid out of Newark, New Jersey. Kenneth was 6'7", 182 pounds, was a 5-man, not a 4-man, had no perimeter skills, and nobody offered us. Morehead State was the only Division I offer he had. 4 years later, he grows an inch. Now he's 6'8". We put 50 pounds of muscle on him. He goes to 6'8", 232. His bench press was 185 coming in the door. He leaves benching 325. He's second team All-American and a first-round draft pick. Now he was a sophomore on that first NCAA tournament team, so he wasn't the true Kenneth Farid yet, but he obviously was a heck of a player. So number one was recruiting. Number two was getting guys better, developing guys like a May Stallworth and a Leon Buchanan, a Brandon Shingles, guys that were non-recruited, and helping them grow and develop. And then I think the third thing was just getting guys to buy in and your community to buy in, where you create a real family environment around your program, a real true culture around your program, where you start to outcompete teams, you start to out tough teams, and that's really what we did at Morehead. We weren't necessarily the most talented team each year. We weren't. Murray State always had great players. Tennessee Tech had great players. Austin Peay had great players. But consistently, we would out-tough those teams and outcompete those teams. And that's what we did literally from day one. Even though our first year we weren't real good, it was 11 teams in the league at that time, and only the top 8 made the conference tournament. And we scrapped and clawed. And the last day, we went to Austin Peay, who won the league championship that year, played them on their senior night at Austin Peay, and we had to win the game to get in the conference tournament, and we did it. We beat them and get in the conference tournament. So even though that would never be a goal of mine after that, we had much larger goals. That first year we did have a losing season, but we still made the conference tournament. We were picked dead last and finished 8th. And that was kind of the building block or the next step on our way. And 2 years later, we're playing in the NCAA tournament.
Man, that's awesome. So you go from a bus breaking down on your first day on the job in St. Catherine to beating, the Louisville. That's about as big as it gets, especially for a guy that's been in Kentucky, and your school's in Kentucky, and you beat Louisville,
Yeah.
and then not just in a game, in a national tournament. I mean, what in the world? It's
Yeah,
crazy. I remember watching it. That's crazy.
Yeah, people still say it's like when JFK was shot. They remember where they were when we beat Louisville, But that first year we went to the NCAA tournament, that was my 3rd season. And that year was the year, Corey, we played the play-in game, beat Alabama State, then played Louisville in the first round and got beat. Then 2 years later was when we went back to the NCAA tournament and played Louisville in the first round. They were what, a 13 and we were a 4. I'm sorry, they were a 4, we were a 13, I believe it was, and
Yep.
and we beat them that year. So it was my 5th year that we actually beat them, and I think having played them 2 years earlier and having a big chunk of that team returning to play them again, the awe factor maybe wasn't there quite as much. But the awe factor was certainly there for me because you got to understand, like Coach Pitino was the guy that I looked up to in the profession. You know, like he was my favorite coach. We played similar to them. I ended up hiring a guy off his staff a few years later. Like he's the guy I've always looked up to. And then Billy Donovan, of course, later, but he comes from the Coach Pitino tree. So to be able to beat them in the NCAA tournament, I tell people, it was almost like when the horn went off, you were almost like above the game or above the crowd looking down on the floor. It was just surreal. Like you couldn't really believe that this was taking place. And so, yeah, a lot of miles, a lot of work, a lot of long film sessions and practices along the way to get to that point. But that was certainly a dream come true. And I think that was certainly is and probably always will be the biggest win in the history of Morehead State, not just basketball, any sport to beat an in-state school like Louisville on that stage in the NCAA tournament, coached by probably the best coach to ever coach the game, and Coach Pitino. Like it's probably never going to get any bigger than that. And you know, we had videos that were sent to me of kids running outside on campus in the lawn on campus going crazy. We had a Buffalo Wild Wings in town where people were up on the bar dancing and going nuts when we made the shot. So all those stories and all those things will live on in folklore, if you will, for the rest of the time.
Put yourself back up there, coach. You're above the game as it ends, looking down. What were you processing? What were some of those feelings? Yeah, what was going through you at that point after all that work and coming to that moment?
Well, you know, the game ended on a we make the shot, we're up one with like 3 seconds to go, so we've got to guard them in the full court. So at that time I was like super composed and poised as to what we were going to try to do in the huddle. And then when Kenneth got tipped the ball and blocked the shot at the end, and I knew we won, there were really like two thoughts going through my mind. My daughter Taylor sat on our bench, so I'm watching her run out with the guys going crazy. But then I wanted to act poised and not in any way what's the word I'm looking for? Overshadow or not show my respect to Coach P.
Right.
So I want to go crazy, but I calmly go shake his hand, and he was very complimentary. But then being able to see on film and catch the tail end of my daughter celebrating was pretty cool.
That's special. That's special. Thanks for sharing that, coach.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how do you end up at Southern Miss from there? How does that go down?
Well, I thought, you know how it is when you win a game like that, your name starts getting mentioned for different positions. And I had a couple of things pop up that I just wasn't thinking it was the right time or situation to leave Morehead for. So I stayed one more year. I went back, and we actually had basically an entire new team. And we were picked toward the bottom of the league, believe it or not, because we lost all those great players. And we ended up finished third in the league. We still won, I think, 19 games, made it the Final Four of the conference tournament, but didn't go back to the NCAA tournament. And then Southern Miss approached me, and that was one where, going back to Larry Eustace, who Leonard Perry worked for, the guy worked for at Idaho, had just left and had done a nice job of rebuilding that program. They weren't real good until his last year, but his last year there, they had went to the NCAA tournament. And they had a little bit of name recognition, if you will, and they were in Conference USA, which at the time was a heck of a league with Memphis and, you know, UAB and Louisiana Tech and East Carolina. I mean, it's pretty much what the American Conference is nowadays. It was a really, really good basketball league, and I just felt like 6 years if there was a time I was going to make the move, I loved Morehead. It was where I played. I absolutely loved being there. There wasn't one part of me that was saying, oh, I got to get out of here. We got to get a job and move on. But this was just the right opportunity. And at Southern Miss, you're going to recruit Louisiana, where I'd recruited before. You're going to recruit Mississippi and Georgia and those states that I've already recruited. It wasn't like I was taking the job to go be the head coach at a school in California or Utah or a place. The contacts, the connections, my recruiting base was already going to be in place there at Southern Miss, and that's the move we decided to make.
How different was it? Conference USA, like as you mentioned, was so tough, but you had been, obviously SEC as an assistant, but you also Sun Belt and OVC. How different was Conference USA?
Well, once again, you took over a job in Southern Miss that had always been considered in that conference one of the lesser jobs in that league, and so we knew we were going to have our hands full. But once again, I guess, I don't ever say it was cockiness or arrogance, because I don't think there's anyone that's ever ran into me that would say that I'm an arrogant guy or come off like I'm better than the next guy. But I do feel like I was always confident internally, thinking that I could knock out Superman if I had to, and so we went into that thing thinking, well, if we can do what we did at St. Catherine, we can do what we did at Morehead State, we certainly can do some of the similar things at Southern Miss. And so, yeah, Memphis is a tall task. I get that. UAB is a tall task. I understand that. But if we can do it at Morehead State and beat the Murray States and Austin Peays of the world, we can do the similar things in this league. And the thing is, we only had 4 returning players. Now, they were good players. They were very good players, but we only had 4 returning. And so we knew we were going to have to go out and get some guys, and we did that. And we turned Morehead State from last to first in 3 years, and they weren't last. They actually finished second the year before, so we felt like we had a chance, even with 4 returning players, to do what we did in regard to getting the type of guys we knew we wanted and build this thing on toughness and grit and competitiveness, and that's what we did. In our first year, we won 27 games, and that was a school record. Went to the Final 4 or Final 8 of the NIT. Probably should have gotten the NCAA tournament. We literally were the last team to not get in, and believe it or not, the team that beat us for the final at-large berth was Kermit in Middle Tennessee, if you can believe that. So we
Bittersweet.
yeah, we just still joke about that to this day. But we went to the Elite Eight. Then the next year we come back and we win 29 games, break the school record, and go the Final 8 of the NIT again. So we didn't get the NCAA tournament, which was certainly the goal, but had the 2 best years in the history of the program, and 2 pretty deep postseason runs in the NIT, and so yeah, it was a great experience. And I tell people that the things that happen with the NCAA afterwards, it's so unfortunate, because I absolutely loved Hattiesburg. I loved being at Southern Miss. To this day, some of my best friends are still there, and we stay in touch, and we did so many positive things. Our players graduated. We had attendance records, and the gym was rocking every night. So it's unfortunate the way things ended up unfolding, but there's not one day that I could say that I regretted or wish that I would not have went to Southern Miss. It was a great 2 years, a lot of fun, and a lot of great people there.
It's awesome, man. I didn't realize y'all won 29 games your last year there. That's unbelievable.
And didn't get in, and that was one of the things. Like that league had become a 1-bid league, Corey. And so, I had a couple other opportunities to take other jobs after my first year there, and I passed on. And then actually the second year I passed on one that most people thought I should have taken, but couldn't pass on Tennessee, because you had a chance to go to a league that obviously was going to get multi-bids. And when you're in a league that's that good with Memphis and all those good schools I've mentioned, and it had become a 1-bid league, it grows a little frustrating. Like, let's go enhance our opportunity to get in the big dance and make a run like we did when I was at Morehead, because otherwise you're putting all your marbles in one bag, if you will. And if you don't win that conference tournament, whether it should or shouldn't be, it becomes a little disappointing.
Mhm. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It all goes to one weekend almost.
Yeah,
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 which is tough. So you go to Tennessee and you end up being the youngest head coach, and you end up getting to tell your first wife, "I told you so." Again, you get her again, right?
yeah, yeah.
So what was that like? Getting on top of the mountain there again?
Well, I look back on it, and it all happened so fast because we had a deep run that postseason. I interviewed for a job. I turned that job down. I end up taking this job. I have to meet with my team at like 6 in the morning. I'm on a flight heading to Knoxville. The press conference is that afternoon, and I'm telling you, to this day, it still gives me anxiety just thinking of how quick everything happened. I get there and I replace Quanzo Martin,
Uh,
who was a great coach and a great guy, but he's a little different than Coach Pearl, and that he was a little more private. He didn't get out in the community as much. And so one of the things the athletic director, Dave Hart at Tennessee, really wanted me to do was get out in the community, let people get to know me, our players, our staff, and try to get them fired up for, what we thought would be a long run like Coach Pearl had. And so I spoke in my first 100 days as the head coach at Tennessee. I spoke to 100 different organizations. Now think about that. Now some of them were 2 or 3 in a day, so it wasn't every day that I was speaking, but 100 organizations in the state or community or on campus in my first 100 days, and we only returned 4 players. And unlike Southern Miss, where we returned 4 good players, we had probably 2 good players. So I'm putting a whole team together. We're picked dead last in the SEC. I'm speaking everywhere known to man to try to create some momentum for our program and excitement about me, etc. And so the whole thing, it was such a blur. It's just crazy. But we put together a good team. We were picked last in the SEC, and we ended up finishing, I think, ninth, out of 14. That the Sagarin ratings, where they basically project how many games you're going to win before the season. Before our season, I think they had us projected to win 8 or 9 total. We went 16-16. We beat Arkansas, who was ranked. We beat Butler, who was ranked. We beat Vanderbilt twice, who was ranked. So all things considered, that first year we totally overachieved. And at the mid-season point, now mind you, that was the year that Calipari had his Kentucky team that went 38-0 and got beat in the Final Four. If they would have won those two, they're first team since Coach Knight to go undefeated. And he ended up getting SEC Coach of the Year. But at the mid-season, there was a national writer, I forget who, wrote an article that at that point in time, the SEC Coach of the Year should be Donnie Tyndall. So I thought that was pretty cool, being picked last and all the things that, we were going through and all that. And obviously I didn't win it. Coach Calipari did. But at that midseason mark, my name was being tossed around in those talks, which was pretty cool looking back on it.
Let's talk about this barnstorming the state of Tennessee, Coach. Mention a couple of these organizations or places that you might have visited that were maybe some of the more fun ones. And do you like that? Do you like standing in front of the people and engaging? I have a feeling that's part of what you do, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. First of all, we went everywhere across the state. I was speaking from the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, to basketball camps, high school teams, uh, alumni and booster foundation functions, you know, other events in the community. Whether it was fundraising type stuff. I mean, you name it, we were there. It was just everywhere you could possibly think on. And then they also have, where you go around with the football coach and the women's basketball coach to these Tennessee functions, like 7 or 8 of those during the summer that are across the state. So a lot of times, not only are you going to speak, but it's a 3 or 4 hour trip wherever you're going. So I remember, I'd be on my way back and I'd call my staff and I'd be like, all right, we're going to meet tonight at 11:30. I'll be back about 11:15. And my staff and I laugh about it nowadays, but I'm sure at the time they were like, holy cow, we've been working all day. Now this guy wants to meet at 11:30 at night, but that was my only time. I had to do it then. So we were working literally day and night, trying to make it happen. And I do enjoy it. I tell you what I don't enjoy is I'm one of those guys, when you're locked in on putting a team together and you know that people are evaluating what type of product you're going to put on the floor and how instrumental recruiting is going to be. That's your lifeline, right? And you're having to maybe take a few hours a day away from that to go speak. That's hard to do. It's hard for me to do. I mean, no one would ever thought I wasn't excited to be there because I think I come across as genuine and having, passion about whoever I'm visiting with or talking with. But I probably didn't want to always be there because I knew what I was missing out recruiting wise that for those 2 or 3 hours. But I also knew the importance to my administration that we get out and do those things. So it's kind of catch-22. I had to do it, needed to do it, and I think people probably perceived that I wanted to do it.
That's a good way to phrase that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you probably stole some from your St. Catherine president that hired you, the former governor.
Yeah,
You were being the governor, basically, right?
Shake and
Yeah,
grin, shake and grin.
yeah, no doubt. Meet and greet and all the things you got to do. And I tell you, who's amazing at that stuff is Kermit, Coach Davis. Like I learned a ton from him in 4 years working with him at LSU, and then for him at Middle Tennessee. Like he's amazing at handling people and boosters, and has such a charismatic personality. So I learned a lot from him in that regard too. So maybe a little bit of that carried over.
Coach, something that gets complicated now as the career advances, but you're very open about talking about what goes down now, tying in the Southern Miss and the Tennessee and the NCAA.
Yeah, that was obviously the worst thing that's happened to me in my career. I'll never forget. It was Halloween night, and I had a guy call me
Wow.
and say, look, man, I just thought I should let you know the NCAA's coming in here to meet with one of my former players that I had signed at Southern Miss. And I was like, really? And I said, any idea what it's about? And they said, yeah, some schoolwork or something. They think that an assistant or a graduate assistant did for him when he was graduating. And I was like, oh man. So long story short, when that hits October 31st, now literally your first game is like November 2nd. So you never got to coach a game at Tennessee where this wasn't hanging over your head. So that didn't make it a whole lot of fun. And I think probably the coaching job that our staff and myself did with all those things hanging over top of us for the entire time that we were there, to be able to still have the season we just talked about that we did, was truly remarkable. But it was unfortunate. And I've told people this, the bottom line in this stuff we do, whether it's fair, unfair, some people would say right, other people would say wrong. At the end of the day, as the head coach, you're responsible for it all. And if
Mhm.
things are taking place under your watch, whether you know about it, don't know about it, mistakes can honestly happen. Some weren't mistakes, some happen for a reason. At the end of the day, you're responsible. And unfortunately, I lose my job and end up getting a 10-year show cause. So I've come to grips with all that now. My first 2 years, certainly hadn't come to grips with that. There were some very dark days, some days where I quite frankly didn't think I'd ever get to coach again. And that was a very hard, bitter pill to swallow. But I look back on it and things that have taken place, the people that I have eliminated from my life or my circle at that point in time that I thought maybe I could never live without, certainly proved to be they weren't truly with me. And now
Mm.
the group of people I have, the friends I've made, the different experiences I've been able to go through, going to the NBA for 4 years and becoming a better basketball coach, because that truly helped me a ton. Um, Coaching the players I've had the chance to coach at Chipola that I would have never had the opportunity to coach, and watch them reach their goals and dreams, and me being a small part of their success. It wasn't something that you necessarily look back and say, oh, I'm glad that happened, because it certainly isn't. But I also say, looking on the other side of it, I'm glad that I was able to have an impact or be part of an impact on other people and have them be a part of impacting my life that I maybe never would have met or had a chance to be involved with had the deal at Tennessee not happened. So I'm in a good spot, man. I'm in a good spot. You know, I'm 55. Everyone thinks, oh, you're going to get another chance in the next year or so. And maybe I do, maybe I don't. I work for the best athletic director in the country here at Chipola. Not only is he a great man and a great leader, but he's become a great friend. I've had assistant coaches go on to be at Memphis, other Division I schools. I've got 3 guys that have become head junior college coaches that have worked for me here at Chipola. So I get a lot of happiness out of seeing not just my players move up and move on, but my coaches move up and move on. And if I end up retiring here at Chipola, as Coach Corey said earlier, I'm not digging ditches, man, and it could be a whole lot worse. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, there you go. It didn't difficult, dark days and mistakes and responsibility and knowing what's going on. It didn't drive you away from basketball. Here you are thriving in the game of basketball. But is April 2026 circled on your calendar? You'd mentioned, hey, there might be opportunities coming out. That 10-year show cause comes to an end. And how do you feel about that? Is it a goal you're aiming towards, or like you said, you could retire at Chipola?
Well, I would be misleading you and not being honest if I didn't say it's something that you think about. But I also lean on my time at Morehead State, where I look back and know how happy I was and never felt like, oh man, I got to get the next job. It just felt like Southern Miss was a good fit. And at that point in time, it's a move I felt like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And I think I'm in a very similar spot now, and that I love being at Chipola. The administration, the people, the friends I've made have been so supportive. And I'm not going to leave Chipola to just take some random job that's a Division I job to say, yep, I made it back to Division I. For a couple reasons. Number one, I'm happy here. I truly am. I love where I'm at. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I love living in Florida. And the other thing is, with the dynamics of the way everything has changed in college athletics, you can't afford to go take a bad job that doesn't give you the NIL resources you need to try to be competitive within your conference. If you can't take a job in a conference that's in the top third of that league in NIL money, there is a great chance you're going to be there 3 or 4 years, not win, and they're going to fire you. And then I'm 58, 59, 60 years old saying, man, I'd do anything to be the head coach at Chipola still. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not. I've already made up my mind. If I have an opportunity, I'll be very blessed and humbled to consider it. But I'm not going to leave just to say I got back in Division I. It's got to be a good fit. It's got to be the right opportunity. And probably most importantly, for the right people that I'm comfortable working for and with to leave Chipola.
Well, I was hoping you were going to say you were taking a job so we wouldn't have to coach against you here in early November, but no go.
I was going to say, you win your fair share against me, so I'm not buying that. You ain't sandbagging me, man.
Well, tell us a little bit about, you end up winning a G League championship as an assistant coach. I mean, that's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, it really was. I tell people this, my first year out of coaching, I did some TV and radio stuff, a lot of radio stuff for different ESPN networks across the country, where I would kind of be an analyst and once a week come in and talk college basketball. And I enjoyed that, but I obviously missed being in the gym. And I applied for so many jobs. And because the NCAA case hadn't had a decision yet and it was still hanging over my head, I could not get anybody to hire me, and it's different now. Like Coach Pitino got hired at Iona before his case was even heard. Will Wade gets hired at McNeese State before his case was even heard. Sean Miller gets hired at Xavier before his case is even heard. So they weren't doing that when I went through my situation 10 or 12 years ago. And so I couldn't even get an assistant's job somewhere. So the only guys that would give me a chance to be back in a gym and do what I love to do were Coach Dwayne Casey, who was the head coach of the Raptors, and Coach Jerry Stackhouse, who was the head G League coach of the Raptors G League team. And I tell people I had to literally go to another country, going to Canada, kind of like Coach Pitino did when he went to Europe, to be able to get back in a gym. And so I did it, and I did it for $30,000. And I went from having, I think about this now, I had a $1.7 million home to living in a bedroom with a married couple in Mississauga, Canada, renting their bedroom for $1,300 a month to get through the season and be able to
Wow.
coach.
Yep.
So it kind of goes back to, what I did when I went to Iowa Central, living
Iowa
in the dorm
dorms.
room. And you do what you have to do to be able to chase your dream and pursue your goals. And this was my way to get back in the gym and coach young people. And a lot like junior college, the G League, everyone's trying to get to the NBA. Like junior college, everyone's trying to get to Division One. And so you got a chance to help some young guys do that. And I learned so much basketball that year from Coach Stackhouse and the other assistants and the players. The players, I tell people this all the time, like, you learn a lot of basketball and pro basketball from the players. Like, there are incredible basketball minds that play at that level. We had Pascal Siakam, who's with the Pacers now. We had Freddie Van Vliet, who was a rookie. Those guys were rookies for us that year. We had other really good players, E.J. Singler, Will Sheehy, guys that really knew the game, and I was able to learn from them. But Jerry Stackhouse really taught me the NBA game, and I tell people this, that are common fans that say, at that level, they just roll the ball out and it's a player's game and the players are coaching themselves. That could not be further from the truth. Like, those guys at that level are not just great coaches, they're amazing coaches. Like, the different things you do to make pick and roll adjustments. Like, I was known in college my first time around as this great X and O guy. And I'm 10 times better with X's and O's now than I was before I went to the NBA with Coach Stack and then ended up being a G League head coach. But that year was a lot of fun. It was Coach Stack's first year being a head coach, and I'll never forget our first team meeting. He's kind of going around to the assistant coaches and he's saying, okay, Nate, you're in charge of this, and DG, you're in charge of this, and Coach Nicky, you're in charge of this, and John, you're in charge of this. And he gets to me and he said, and Coach DT, you coach me. That's what you're in charge of. You coach me. So, he put a lot of confidence in me, and trust me when I tell you now, all those assistants knew more NBA basketball than me. Coach Stack played 18 years in the league. Like, I may have taught him one thing the entire year where he taught me about 500 things. So it was a great learning experience for me. It made me a better coach. It made me so appreciative to get back in a gym and be blessed to do what I love to do. And then the next year, I'd only seen my wife, a few weeks that year. We were going through some problems. This is my second wife. My daughters were still in high school. I'd seen them like 2 weekends the entire year. And so I made up my mind I just couldn't go back and do it. But the organization let me do some scouting for them, college scouting, to stay involved in the game. And so I did that year, kept me around the game, kept me in the gym a little bit. And then the next year, Coach Casey took the Pistons job and hired me in their G League staff there. The first year I was the top assistant, and then the next year I was the head coach. And so 4 years of being involved with the NBA organizations was really a true blessing for me and helped me grow and become a better coach.
I hear you. And you talk about the G League being like the JUCO, right? Everybody's looking to move to that next level, and here you are, the head coach, back in your home state, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what was that like with constantly moving personnel and driving the vans to the games, right?
Well, I think this, first of all, not only was it my home state, but it was my home city. The
Right.
Detroit G League team was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where I grew up. So to be able to go back there and coach the G League team for the team I grew up, it was Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Lambier. Like, those were my favorite players and favorite teams. And I'm involved with the Pistons now, working for their organization, coaching in my home city where my mom and dad were still there. My sister's still there. I had some friends that were still there. And so I was able to be right back there around people I love and knew and spend some time with them when I wasn't coaching. So it was an unbelievable opportunity for me. Um, we ended up, our season got cut about 5 or 6 games short because of the COVID that spring. But it was the best winning percentage in the history of the organization to that point. So I proved to myself in my mind that I could coach pros at that level and have success. And so that kind of scratched an itch, if you will. I really wanted to see if I could do that as the head coach, and I was able to prove to myself, if nothing else, that I could. And then the Chipola job opened. And when I got the job, a friend of our athletic directors called me and said, "Hey, would you have an interest in this?" I said, "Absolutely, I would." It was just kind of a perfect storm where you don't know what's going to unfold with the NBA organization, because quite frankly, the Pistons weren't doing great at that time. And it was a chance for me to get back. Even though this isn't a Division I school, I knew I'd be coaching basically a Division I team, Division I players, Division I resources, and et cetera. And so I jumped on the opportunity to get back at the college level.
I know with this being getting back into college is the main thing, but this was probably just going through the history of your programs. You've often done jobs that were, we've mentioned it, they were in bad places when you got there. This is a place that has an unbelievable tradition, even though it's junior college. Some people may not look at it that way, but I mean, you're talking, one of the kings of the kings. I mean, it's up there.
Well, the biggest thing for me, just what you said, was I knew it was an incredible job, having recruited down here for years when I was in Division I. Think about this: the head coach at Iowa State, TJ, had been an assistant at Chipola. Kermit Davis at the time was the head coach at Ole Miss. Chris Jans is the head coach at Mississippi State. Like, they've had great coaches come through here for years and years with great players, just as you mentioned, storied tradition and past. And the only thing they haven't done here is win a national championship. They have in women's basketball, they have in softball, they have in baseball, but they hadn't done it. And that's my goal. And we haven't quite done it yet. We've been to a couple Final Fours, but that's the goal. And my dream is to win a national championship for these people here at Chipola. But you're right. It was the first time. Now, Tennessee probably would have been a job in time that you say is an upper echelon job in their conference. When I took it over, it wasn't, because we only had 4 players returning, right? But this is the first job I've had where you walk in the door and the expectations are to win and win big. And so I'd never been part of that. And so it is unique when you go around and you play in summer jamborees or fall jamborees. I try to tell our team, like, to us, it might be a jamboree game where we're going to play everybody and try to get guys better. But to the team we're getting ready to play, it's their Super Bowl. Even though it may not even be a regular season game, you're going to get their best shot. And certainly once the regular season starts, it gets ratcheted up a few notches. Like, you are getting everyone's best shot. And that is an adjustment. That is an adjustment. You got to kind of address things a different way, rather than saying, "Hey, we're the underdog and we're going to go shock the world." It's, understand now, we've got a bullseye on our back and everyone's aiming to come get us and chase us down. And so that has been different. But I also think it's neat to have, or it's good to have, experience on both ends, because you just never know what you're going to end up, if you do leave, walking into, good, bad, or indifferent. And this is an experience where for 5 years we've been, highly ranked. I think we've been ranked now for like 57 straight weeks. We won 135 games in 5 years, which is tied for #1 in the country. So, we've done some great things in taking people's best shots along the way and doing that. With that being said, I'm still not real pleased because we haven't done what we have set out to do, and that's to win the whole thing. And hopefully at some point in time, I hope it's this year, we can make that happen.
Oh, you say 5 seasons, 5 conference titles, 5 Coach of the Years. Those accolades stack up, but the goal is bigger than that. So how do you get there, Coach? What do you have to do in today's day and age of basketball, the NIL, the extra years at the junior college level? What has you tweaked? What's changed at the top levels for Chipola?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us has been, we've had 2 or 3 years where we've went to Hutch and had season-ending injuries, either in the state tournament or the first round of the national tournament. We go the Final Four my first year, And right before the state tournament, which we ended up winning, we lost our backup point guard who averaged about 7-8 a game, and we go the Final Four. I really believe if he plays with one more playmaker out there, we may have won the whole thing. We lose by, I think, 3 to Coffeyville. They win it the next night. Okay, the next year we go back to Hutch. We make it the Final Four with our best defender, our toughest player, our sixth man, Dante Walker. The first half of our first game at Hutch tears his ACL, and he's out the rest of the national tournament. So that's 2 years in a row that one injury may have been the difference. All right. So then year 3, we probably just weren't quite good enough. Although at one point we were 21-0, number 1 in the country, we probably just weren't quite good enough to win a national title. My 4th year, we win the state championship. I think we probably have a legit chance to go win a national title. We're playing as good as anybody. And our starting 4-man, J.J. Walton, in a practice 2 days before we leave to go to Hutch, tears his ACL and doesn't get to play in the national tournament. So literally 3 of the 5 years that we've had a very, very critical piece of our puzzle go down with a season-ending injury. So I'm not saying we win it all 3 years, but to answer your question, how do we get there? Number 1 is to stay healthy. We got to stay healthy. You know, you've got to be good. You've got to be talented enough, but you got to get a little bit lucky and keep everyone healthy during your run. And number 2, it goes back to recruiting. Now, this year, we literally have every player in our organization in our program is new. We didn't bring back one returning player. So it comes back to recruiting. I feel like our staff in particular, Trent Short did a great job of recruiting and working and bringing in not just talented players. We're definitely more talented than we were a year ago, but my type of guys, the toughness, the competitive nature, the willingness to sacrifice themselves in parts of their game for the betterment of the team. That's not always the case in today's day and age, as we all know. And so those are 2 things that I think are imperative. And then the third thing is continuing to have your culture remain the same, even though you have a whole new group of players, making sure that nothing falls to the wayside in regard to toughness, competitiveness, outworking people, out-toughing people, things that we've done really probably since I've been here and every step along the way of my coaching career. So those 3 things are really non-negotiables. And you've got to have good players. You got to have guys that will compete and buy into your culture. And then you got to have health, you know. And if you can have those 3 things, I truly believe at a place like Chipotle, you're going to give yourself a chance.
Here's what I would say makes it so tough. And I don't know if common fan will know this that's watching. It's they play everybody 3 times. They don't play twice like you do in normal college basketball. And they're am I wrong, Donnie? Y'all do that still, right?
Yeah, you're right. We play each other.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you know, by the time you play one of these league teams the 3rd time, it's like 16-11 at halftime, and the final score is like 34-27. Like, I mean, you know, every single thing they're going to do. They know every single thing you're going to do. You know, every player's tendencies. They know your player's tendencies. Like, they could basically coach your team and you coach their team. It's that there's that much familiarity with it. But it's fun because the adjustments you make game to game, it's like almost like an NBA series where you're making adjustments every single time you play, and it makes it a lot of fun from a coach's standpoint. And I got to show you the MVP of the real MVP. This is my doggy. His name, guess his name. You'd be shocked. It's Hooper.
Let's go. I like
Let's go, Hooper.
All right. Well, with the Hooper's cameo, let's close this thing out. Me and Cyril, we usually do a quick lightning round, 3 questions apiece. Shot clock's on. We'll go a little faster. We've taken a lot of your time, and man, we appreciate you giving it to us. Cyril, do you want to start off?
I appreciate you guys. Yep, let's do it.
All right,
Cyril,
let's move quickly here. We've heard a bunch throughout this conversation. But is it DT? Is it Coach T? Is it Donnie? Is it Tindy? What's your pick for your coaching name? What do you want everybody to call you?
Most everybody, even my players, call me DT. Some will call me Coach T, but for the most part, that's one thing too that's kind of cool. When I went to the NBA and saw how everybody calls the coach by their first name or a nickname, my first time through coaching, I would have been like, "Hey, you're gonna call me Coach. It's Coach Tyndall." But now I'm like, just call me DT, and I'm good with that. So DT would be the answer on that one.
All right, so you're DT. You're not Trent Short. Anybody watching us on YouTube sees that name down there. Give us 2 to 3 of your assistants who have made an impact and why. What was something they did there? You already
Oh
mentioned
man.
Trent and his recruiting that's going on at Chipola, but you've got a whole list. You could go on for hours, but let's hear a couple of those names.
Yeah, I think I've been so fortunate here at Chipola to have great coaches. The first guy would be Lane Blue. Lane was with me for 2 years. He did an outstanding job. He'd been a graduate assistant for Kermit at Ole Miss. Lane's now the head coach at Gulf Coast, and we don't like each other anymore now that we're arch rivals. But he's a talented guy. Lane's going to be a head Division I coach. I just think the absolute world of him. Lane would be one. Brandon Shingles would be number two. Brandon was my former point guard at Morehead State. Came here with me for 2 years. He's now a Division I assistant at Cal State Northridge. He's another guy that I feel like will be a head Division I coach, just multi-talented. The third guy would be Jordan Berholz. Jordan was with me in the G League for a year. He was with me my first year here as associate head coach, and now he went to Memphis, and now he's the offensive assistant at Murray State under Coach Miller. And then I've had a bunch of them, but then the guy I have now who I think is going to be as good as any of them, if not better, is Trent Short. Trent's a Florida guy. His dad was a great high school coach in the Pensacola area. He loves basketball. He works day and night. I named him associate head coach this year. He recruited a lot of the guys this year that we have, and so I'm bragging on them now. But if our season goes bad, you know who to blame, and that'll be Trent. But he'll be a head coach or a Division I assistant coach here in the near future as well. So those are some guys that have done great. They moved on. Trent will be moving on, but I'm proud of all those guys and the others that I didn't mention as well.
I'm sure you are. Yeah, the list just goes on and on. You mentioned early you shook Pitino's hand, a coach that you looked up to. You talked about Billy Donovan and the influence there, either from one of them or somebody else. What is that kind of best piece of advice in hard times or in winning times that you received from a mentor, another coach, or somebody you look up to?
Well, I think I go back to when I was getting ready to become a head coach for the first time. And I told you that Billy Donovan had called Governor Collins on my behalf. And then afterwards, when I called him to thank him and tell him that I got the job, I asked him, I said, "Can you give me some advice?" And I was 23 years old at the time, but I'll never forget the one thing he said to me. And it stuck with me. I've passed this on to all my assistants or guys I've given advice to since then, was be yourself. I remember him specifically saying, "DT, you cannot be Coach Pitino. You cannot be me. Be yourself. That's good enough. And if you aren't, the players are going to vibe that and they're going to read through it." And I think I always have been myself. Maybe there's part of a Coach Pitino or a Coach Donovan or a Coach Brady or a Coach Davis in my package, if you will, a Coach Casey, a Coach Stackhouse. But I have always just been myself, and I think the players that vibe and that passion that I do what I do with always resonates and rubs off onto my teams.
Those are good pieces of advice received, and it sounds like implemented all the way along the way. All right, Corey, tag.
All right, I got my three here. I always do some food questions. I'm a big foodie, Donnie. Best place to eat in Chipola?
Oh man, there's only one real spot, and that's Beef O'Brady's. We go there breakfast, lunch, and dinner, brother.
I love it. I love it. All right, give me the one
Wait,
time,
that's the first time on the podcast that Beef O'Brady's has been top of the list. That's for sure.
Yeah,
well,
I love it.
Mariana's not a big metropolitan area, so there's not a ton of choices.
And we knew you were in Florida because Beef O'Brady seems to be everywhere in Florida.
No doubt.
It does seem to be everywhere in Florida. I always ask this. This is one of my favorite ones to hear responses of, and some people take it their own way. But, you obviously making all the way to SEC. What was the first time when maybe you thought you had arrived, or maybe it was at Morehead, or maybe it was even at St. Catherine, and you got humbled a little bit? Maybe somebody didn't know who you were, or didn't recognize you, or somebody thought you were the girls' coach or whatever. I don't know.
You know, that's happened to me a lot over my career at different places, but boy, I'd have to think about that. There's definitely been times where you walk in a place and think, well, maybe someone here may know me, and they have no idea who you are. I don't know, probably I think probably we went the first time we're going to the NCAA tournament, and we're going to Indianapolis. We're playing in the play-in game against Alabama State, and we have the media day that you do for like 30 minutes the day before the game with like 2 or 3 players and yourself. And I still look pretty young at the time. I'm like 36, but I probably look 28, 29. And I forgot my lanyard deal with your detail that gets you in your little pass or whatever. So I'm going to the media deal with my team. Now I've got 3 players with me. I've got my Morehead State sweatsuit on. I'm walking with my sports information director, and we get up to go on the deal, and they said, "Can we see your pass, sir?" And I was like, "I forgot it at the room. I'm sorry." And they made me like wait there and get triple checked and get admitted to go to the media press conference, you know. And so here we are getting ready to coach in the NCAA tournament. We actually won the game the next night, and I can't even get in to do the media deal. So that one probably taught me a good lesson. I've never forgot it since then. Trust me.
Well, we always with this one we preface here this question. We want to know the best place you've played, as far as atmosphere or the actual arena itself, and the worst, if you can answer it without hurting anybody you're still battling. And you can't count where you've been. So you can't count where you've been. So you can't use it as a recruiting ploy to tell us how great it is to play at Chipola. You gotta cut that one out. We already know that one. All right, go ahead.
All right, so probably the nicest place, coupled with one of the 3 loudest places I've ever coached, would be Arizona.
Ooh, that's a
Beautiful,
good one.
beautiful arena. It
Uh,
gets so loud in there you can't hear your player if you're 6 inches away talking. Arkansas and Wichita State were the other 2 super loud places. But talking about just
awesome.
beautiful arena coupled with a tough environment to play in, I would say Arizona. And then probably who I've coached in some bad ones now. You understand, I've been in junior college.
Exactly. I was kind of excited to hear your answer to this one. We've
G
heard some
League,
good
junior college. Yeah.
Yeah,
ones.
I tell you, and the guy at Reed State's a buddy of mine. I don't know if you played there, Corey, but he's a real good dude and a good
Uh,
young coach. But we went up to Reed State last year. They
I've heard
played
some
us here,
stories.
so we returned the game, and it's a tiny little gym, not real bright lights, kind of a dingy, tiny little gym. But the thing that set it apart is, I'm telling you, we needed our snowmobile suits and snow boots in that locker room. It was so damn cold. We were shivering. We came in for halftime, and I didn't even bring the team in the locker room. It was so cold. I kept them out in the hallway to talk. So probably Reed State, that's a pretty tough environment, and not because of the hostile fans. It's pretty tough to get a sweat going at Reed State.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I always love it. I knew it would probably be a JUCO place. That's the reason I was excited for it. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, good deal. Well, Donnie, man, we really appreciate your time. I think anybody listening hears the passion and knows why you've lasted, and know this means the world to you. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here. Unbelievable path, unbelievable journey. Again, thank you for your time. And even though I hate playing against your teams, I love playing against them too, because I know it's always a good, other than the outcome, the experience is always good. You do a great job. So I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you, Coach. I got a ton of mutual respect. I know how hard you grind, and you've had really, really tough jobs yourself, and won everywhere you've been. And again, anytime I can help you, let me know. But it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you, man.
You've been great with
All
the
right.
stories and the time. This is probably the longest Off the Beaten Path podcast. So we're hitting record numbers as far as minutes go. Coach, any final thoughts from you that you want to share? Mention some people, anything like that? We'd love to hear that and give you the floor for the last round.
I just think the biggest thing for any young coach that may be listening is have a true passion for what you do. This job has become so challenging and so many more obstacles with what, like you mentioned earlier, the NIL, the transfer portal, all the things that come with, handling and managing people and trying to put the best team you can possibly put together. Just stay true to the biggest thing that probably got you started in this profession, and that's for your love of the game and your love of helping young people. Because I truly think this, whether it's Reed State, Tennessee, the NBA, back to JUCO, whatever it happens to be, at whatever level you're at, if you're doing this because you love basketball and you love helping young people, even if you aren't the winningest coach out there, you're going to get some real satisfaction out of what you're doing for other people. And that's what it's really all about, man.
There you go. That's a perfect spot to wrap it up. All right. So yeah, Tindy, any problems? Not today. This was a good one.
No problems at all, Coach. Have a good day, guys.
Tindy, no problems here on this podcast as he told all those stories, Corey. That was quite the winding road, the off the beaten path from the car motor blowing up in Kentucky to a 10-year show cause out of the NCAA coaching. So yes, bobbing and weaving, and here he is thriving at Chipola. So everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for going through this story with Donnie Tyndall and the two of us. We appreciate you. Make sure you follow along on our socials for Off the Beaten Path podcast for Instagram and a little Off the Beaten Path _, on X Twitter.
And thanks for listening to the podcast. Special thanks again to DT. Really enjoyed it. Great stories. And, we may be the last show to interview him before he goes back to the big show, as they like to say. We really just enjoyed it. And thanks again, Don.